You want me to say more? Dude.
Where's my car? Wow.
Bad. Not bad. Yeah,
Good
it's
movie.
yeah, I mean, I can't wait for tonight. Yeah, I mean, listen, I hate the reason why it happened, but I am pro doubleheader football on Monday night. I'm also pro Tuesday night football.
I mean,
and I can get behind Wednesday night football if anyone wants to do that.
Well, we got some action.
I enjoy the Saturday football when it gets later in the season.
Yeah, we got action coming back soon. We have Big Ten football coming back this weekend. By the way, word of weather caution tonight. It is supposed to be a washout in Buffalo throughout most of the day. We'll see whether that rain holds up into the evening tonight. Patrick Mahomes might only throw 3 touchdowns as opposed to 4 if the rain really is an issue. We'll talk about Monday Night Football.
Or could throw 6 because again, like a swing pass to Tyreek Hill and it's all slippery and you can't catch him to begin with.
Yeah.
But then the ball and the jersey is slippery. And I tend to think bad weather sometimes favors the offensive player versus the defensive player because the offensive player knows where they're going. So when the footing is less secure, the defensive player can't cut, as well. And so I've seen, low-scoring, muddy, awful games, obviously, but I've also seen ridiculously high-scoring games in bad weather as well.
Yeah, well, if we have some time at the end of the show, we'll empty the bucket with a few more Monday Night Football thoughts for that doubleheader, which begins at 5 p.m. Eastern Time with Chiefs and Bills, followed, of course, by Cowboys and Cardinals right here on ESPN. As is always the case on Sundays, there are a number of injuries that crop up, and we have to talk about them on Monday. So we begin by going to the great Stephania Bell to get us through the injury recaps from Sunday. And Stephania, I could name every Eagles offensive injury right now. It just might take us into Wednesday's show. Most pertinent, though, for fantasy is Miles Sanders, who left the game yesterday.
Yeah, Miles Sanders left with a knee injury and is going to have it evaluated today. He's expected to undergo an MRI. He was replaced by Boston Scott in the third quarter, so that's about when it happened. The issue for Miles Sanders is going to be that they play on Thursday night. And so even if this proves to not be a particularly serious injury, and really don't have any notion of that yet, I think it's going to be difficult for him to be able to be ready on Thursday night.
Might as well hit all the Eagles at one time here, Stephania. Zach Ertz also left the game yesterday.
Right. Now, and Dallas Goedert already on IR. Zach Ertz had an ankle injury. You saw him perhaps limping around. He came out, got it checked, went back in the game, and then at one point just couldn't continue and asked out of the game permanently. So Zach Ertz also expected to undergo further evaluation today and faces the same challenge. I mean, it's going to be really interesting because Dallas Goedert, if you recall, went on the IR with an ankle injury, was first called a sprain. Then they determined that he had a small fracture, and we haven't gotten much more detail on it. So it's really hard to know where he would stand and how quickly he could get ready. But there's a possibility that neither is available for Thursday.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Goddard is eligible to play on Thursday night, but based off the IR rules. But as Stephania is saying, no guarantee he does actually play, given his recovery from that previous injury. So,
yeah, I mean, tough one, obviously. And it's a shame, obviously, because it's a great matchup on Thursday night with the Giants. But we'll wait to see what happens, obviously. We'll talk about it tomorrow and obviously follow Stephania on Twitter. But I would make plans to be without Miles Sanders and Zach Ertz on Thursday night.
And unfortunately, we've been down this road a little bit before for the Eagles having to turn to a running back besides Miles Sanders. Boston Scott had 11 total touches in week 1 when he filled in for Sanders. Remember, he missed that first game of the season. Sort of remarkable how he's still third in the NFL in rushing despite missing a game. Miles Sanders has been great so far this year. He may not be available on Thursday night. Same with Zach Ertz. And again, the Eagles, they've just been so decimated by injuries, as have the 49ers, Stephania. But they got a huge win last night. Looked much more like the 49ers that we have grown to know. However, their best running back, Raheem Mostert, is now banged up as well.
Again, right? Because he had that sprained MCL and came back from that and provided a real boost to the offense. And obviously, I watched that game like a hawk. And he's just got this incredible speed, quickness from the minute he touches the ball. So he ends up with an ankle injury that keeps him out late in the game. Now, it was his left ankle. He appeared to have it reinforced with tape, but then ultimately did not return. It was his right knee that was injured previously, so opposite side. But there's no telling as of today whether this will ultimately cost him time, but obviously you hate to see it.
And we'll keep an eye on that one for Sunday against the Patriots. Kyle Shanahan pretty good about giving us information on injuries. I believe Tevin Coleman is eligible to be back off of IR this week. So if Mostert is out, they could potentially have Tevin Coleman along with Jerick McKinnon. Obviously, the running game last night was fantastic, in large part because the wide receivers were basically catching, they were 1 yard receptions, or I should say not even 1 yard. They were behind the line of scrimmage. That's what they did. They manufactured touches last night.
Yeah, exactly, especially for Deebo Samuel. And Jermichael Hasty actually had a couple of nice runs as well, filling in as well. So I really hope Raheem Mostert is healthy, not only because I like the player a lot and you never want to see players injured, but also because I don't want to have to try to make a sense of the 49ers backfield if he were to miss time.
But if he does play, he certainly has emerged as their best runner this season.
There's no question about that.
Calvin Ridley's been one of the best wide receivers in football, but he left the game yesterday, Stephania. A little bit of a scare, but any word on whether that's something that concern us going forward?
Yeah, at first I thought it was another soft tissue injury because certainly that's plagued the team so far this season, but it sounds like it was a cramping issue for him yesterday, so I don't expect this to be something that extends beyond the game.
Okay, that's excellent news, obviously, as he has been, one of their best players, and they have needed any efforts they can get. Yesterday was a remarkable bounce-back game for the Falcons, who got their first win of the season. Kudos to Raheem Morris, his first win in his first game as the interim head coach. And, oh, by the way, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones are back in a major way. That was encouraging to see. Jonnu Smith left the game for the Titans, if I'm not mistaken, Stephania. A very dramatic win for them over the Texans. Any concern on their star? And that's right, star tight end.
Yeah, so it was his right ankle, and he limped off, and he slammed his helmet down. So sometimes when players do that, it makes me pay attention that they obviously think something is more seriously wrong. He had it taped, but he came out early in the third quarter, and so it remains to be seen whether this is something that's going to be problematic for him going into this week. I think while we're here talking about the Titans, also important to mention that tackle Taylor Lewan supposedly tore his ACL, and that could be a big problem for their offense as well.
They'll have an MRI today on Lewan to confirm whether the ACL is indeed torn. He's a 3-time Pro Bowl player and just a great part of that offensive line. If they do lose Lewan, they're maybe looking at Isaiah Wilson, their first-round pick out of Georgia, who's had a very troublesome start to his career. Twice on the COVID list. He was cited at Tennessee State for being at a party he wasn't allowed to be at. He's had a tough start to his rookie season, but he could be thrust into a major role for them going forward. Yeah. Tight end targets on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Ferkser had a great game filling in for Jonnu Smith.
From?
Shame, obviously. From Ferkser State. I actually don't know.
That's pretty good. Harvard.
Harvard? Oh.
Harvard.
Oh, is he smart like Ryan Fitzpatrick? Oh, good.
I mean, it's not Princeton, but he's smart. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, the Syracuse of the North.
Right.
So anyway, what I was going to say is it's a shame, obviously, because Jonnu Smith would have had a massive game, which we thought would happen in this matchup with the Texans. And so disappointing, but I assume that if Jonnu Smith were to miss some time, Anthony Ferkser would be very high on your waiver wire column.
Maybe. You think so? Very high?
I mean, it's an offense that, first off, Tannehill's playing at a truly great level, and it's an offense that likes to target the middle of the field, especially at least as long as Corey Davis is out. I know Adam Humphries caught the touchdown yesterday, and there's a nice little floor there with Adam Humphries, but yes, given the dearth of viable tight ends and how fantasy friendly the Titans offense has been to tight ends, give me some Anthony Ferkser.
He might be on the waiver wire. I don't know if he'll be super high up. We'll see. Stefan, you like that use of dearth right there from Matthew? He definitely spent Saturday in the thesaurus.
You know what happens when Matthew finds a word and learns it? It then makes a regular appearance for a while.
That's right.
I hadn't noticed.
Yeah. Can you spell dearth?
Yes, I believe it is DEARTH.
Well done.
Ding, 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 ding.
Well done.
Little spelling bee.
That's right.
We should do that sometime.
Not just a bunch of good looks over here.
I was going to say, that hat it's more than just a hat rack over there, right?
Yeah.
Stephania, Darius Slayton was questionable to play for the Giants on Sunday. He ended up playing and actually had a pretty nice game as well. Yeah, that's right.
On the end zone.
But is he now hurt again?
Would you trade him for Chase Claypool?
Maybe.
Oh, stop it. No, I would not. Not at this point, because I'm not trading a guy who's clearly still injured. I don't know if it was hurt and then got hurt again. I think this is a case where he was questionable to play and probably wasn't 100%. And goes out and feels it, and then was in and out of the game as a result. So I think this is more of the same, and hopefully not a further setback. But again, we'll see what they're doing this week in practice. But I would expect him to remain sort of this limited practice questionable.
And again, they played a Thursday night game against the Eagles.
They can certainly use him, though, because yesterday when they were playing with 2 wide receivers, Slayton remains I don't think his role changes if and when Sterling Shepard returns to the lineup. I think it may be him and Sterling Shepard as the 2 wide receivers on the field as opposed to maybe Golden Tate running ahead of the 2 of them.
I agree.
All right, the Ravens enter a bye this week, Stephania, so not sure this matters maybe in the grand scheme if he's okay, but what do we know about Mark Ingram's ankle injury that cost him some time yesterday?
Really just that he was not able to return to the game. And this is a situation where when a team has somebody who can step right in and handle the load and do what they need, they're not going to put a player like Mark Ingram at risk. So it sounded like he was not ruled out immediately, but there was no reason to put him back in, as you said, with the bye coming up. We'll see if he's able to get back after that.
Hard for me to get super excited about throwing Gus Edwards onto the waiver wire column, but I think his name will have to be on there just in case something does happen that keeps Mark Ingram out of the mix for more than just the Ravens bye week. Last one here, Stephania, in terms of the major injuries from yesterday. Joe Mixon, who was running okay for the Bengals, and at least the volume has been there, but now he's a little bit banged up.
Yeah, another running back with a foot issue. This is a huge topic. I mean, that we don't need to get into here, but look at what the injuries are particularly for these running backs and receivers: foot, toe, ankle, all these lower extremity injuries that have really become problematic and causing missed time, or at least missed time within a game. And that's what happened with Joe Mixon, where he had a foot issue. He did come back into the game. So, when you see a player come back, that's always encouraging, but I expect him to be on the injury report and limited in practice, and we're going to have another question mark going into next week.
Giovanni Bernard has typically stepped into a more prominent role when the Bengals have dealt with injuries to Joe Mixon, but Joe Mixon seems like he's a pretty tough dude who can also gut some of these out as well. Again, the Bengals yesterday fall after leading 21-0 over the Colts. But here's the good news. You know whose fault it wasn't yesterday? A.J. Green's. As we get into, are they back? That's our question on several players who maybe we thought we had thrown into the fantasy graveyard. And then what's that guy again, Daniel? The guy who emerged.
Is it the Overtaker?
Yeah, the Overtaker. Right, the Overtaker.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So they're like imagine
the Undertaker. Yeah.
Undertaker.
Oh,
okay.
Undertaker. Dang it.
Dang.
I'm sorry.
There's like 3 gifs of like people coming out of coffins.
Right.
Like the one is like, because you watch wrestling because you're still a 12-year-old boy. Like that's the only one you reference.
Oh, wow.
Wait for wrestling Twitter to come at
you
you
better
today.
watch out. Yeah.
You are in
I got breakfast beer
trouble.
Twitter already all over you. Like the wrestling Twitter. You are so
Watch
going
out.
down.
I have no issue with wrestling. I have an issue with you, but I have no issue with wrestling.
Good.
Backpedaling.
We should wrestle over this. Yeah. Put that on the ESPN Plus. We'll get some new subs.
We'll bring
little
Roflo back
and
and let him do a big
What are they called? Do they call it singlets?
Singlets.
Like, yeah,
Yes.
singlets.
Put you in a leotard, though.
Grease ourselves up.
I think that had to
Right.
be on E+ if you guys were in singlets. I don't think that's basic cable television,
Right.
unfortunately.
Very homoerotic. I'm all right with it. That's fine.
It would be exclusive to the ESPN Plus subscribers that don't have it as part of Disney Plus, the bundle, right?
Right.
Disney Plus bundlers wouldn't get it. The just exclusive ESPN
Just
Plus
exclusive.
people would get it. Yeah.
Listen, I love it. I'm in. By the way, you would be favored in that, and I don't think you should be.
Wow.
I'm just
Fighting
telling you, I would
words.
fight dirty. I'm a scrapper.
Sports entertainment.
I'm a scrapper. By the way, yeah, and if it was wrestling, like I'd get my buddies that write wrestling. I'd be like, yeah, write the good ending for me.
Survival.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Do
I would
everything
just
with power.
reemerge like the Overtaker and take care of business. More seriously, AJ Green did his best Undertaker gif yesterday, as he had 8 catches for 96 yards yesterday and 11 targets. The volume has not been the issue for AJ Green. It's been the efficiency. So I think what we need to kind of do is when we're assessing these players is like, are they back, Matthew? I think there are a couple of stages of being back. One would be somebody like AJ Green was starting to be dropped left and right. And we had encouraged people like that it was okay to drop AJ Green.
Don't think so.
Step one. Okay. So there's sort of 3 steps. One would be, I don't care what he did yesterday. You can still drop him. He's still not startable. Step 2 would be, all right, I'm interested enough that I'm not starting him next week, but I'm keeping him on my bench because I think better days are ahead. And step 3 would be, that's right, he's back, baby. Put him back in your lineup. So where would you be with A.J. Green?
I'm more step 1 or step 2. I'm definitely not making him an automatic start. We're through 6 weeks of the season. He's had one good week.
Yep.
We're through 6 weeks of the season. He's had one good week. And the one good week he had was in a crazy shootout game where, again, and listen, let's be clear. Joe Burrow has to, this is not atypical. Joe Burrow's going to throw a lot. But, I mean, T. Higgins had a big game here. Tyler Boyd got a lot of looks as well. And I'd need to see it again. He's 1 for 6 again. And so, yeah, like I don't mind, like if you have somebody else that you want to drop, I don't mind that. Or if somebody was dropped and you want to take a flyer on him to see if maybe he has worked his way back into game shape, sure, fine, because the volume's going to be there. It has been all year long. But again, he's had one good week out of 6. It's not like some of these other players that suddenly emerge and they're like, oh, like I'm trying to think of like T. Higgins. T. Higgins worked his way into the lineup, right? Travis Fulgham worked his way into the lineup, and then you're like, oh, hey, now he's got an opportunity. A.J. Green's had an opportunity from day one. He's gotten targets and looks from day one. And week 6 is the first time he put it together in a significant way. So, yeah, I mean, I have no problem having him on your roster. He is not somebody I'm willing to say, like, after one good game, oh, yeah, he's definitely back. I'm not there yet.
Stephania, fortunately, he did figure his way through this game due to that after that hamstring injury last week. That was an encouraging sign.
Right. And I think the fact that he played through it, look, A.J. Green is super competitive. And if you've paid attention to how he's handled coming back from the significant injuries he's always had this chip on his shoulder. People don't think I can do this. And he kind of approached this season the same way. And that's why a week ago I was saying, let's watch and see what he does in the second half of the season. That was before he had this left hamstring setback. I was surprised he was able to play, but I still saw that the longest play that he had only went for 19 yards. So I don't think we've seen anything like the prior A.J. Green. I'll agree with you on that. But I also think that this guy is scrappy and wants to prove a point and clearly has a reason to do so coming up at the end of this season. And part of when, Matthew, you say he hasn't put it all together, I think this has been a combination of him and Joe Burrow just not clicking, especially early on. I wouldn't put it all on Green, but to that end, he has not looked like himself. I would still, I agree with you. I have no issue with people dropping him and moving on. But I think that you could see a turnaround of A.J. Green in the second half of the season.
All right, well, we're monitoring. One more week, A.J., maybe 2 before we start to buy into it. Gronk.
Look, I will say this. Same game, another big name wide receiver that has initials. I'm out on him.
Who?
T.Y. Hilton.
I thought he retired.
He did not. He did not retire.
What?
He was still out there.
We'll talk about him later
routes
on in the show. Yes, we will.
Fine.
Gronk had his first Gronk spike since 2018. He went lefty with that Gronk spike. What a curveball from Gronk.
You know why he did? Because his right shoulder was what had him on the injury report. And he couldn't do it with his right arm.
Yeah.
Oh, look at
Stephania with the extra intel.
There you go.
Yeah.
5 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown for Gronk yesterday. Still not. I mean, the Bucs said going into the season, like, he looks like the Gronk from 6 years ago. He does not, but it was an encouraging day, Matthew. All the way back, step 1, step 2, step 3.
He looks like the Gronk from 6 years in the future is what he looks like. He looks slow as molasses out there. Having said that, you know what? But by the way, Jason Witten's looked slow for a decade. I'm like, at the tight end position, especially when you're a veteran like Rob Gronkowski, and you have a quarterback like Tom Brady who can be as accurate as Brady can be, I don't know that matters. Like, he doesn't need to outrun people. He just needs to outbody people. He just needs to use his body for positioning to get himself open, which is what happened a lot yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, he looks slow, but whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so there's not going to be a ton of yards after the catch, but, I mean, they're definitely looking for him, obviously.
Remind me to tell the T.Y. Hilton story I have for a little bit later on in the show. It's like an all-time hilariously bad lineup. Matt Ryan is quarterback 2 for the week so far going into Monday Night Football, as he had 4 passes. But on Gronk, by the way, just to put a pin in it,
sure.
There's like 4 good tight ends in fantasy football. Yeah, Gronk is going to slide somewhere between like 8th and 15th for rankings most weeks, I think, going forward. And still, I mean, like, they have a lot of mouths to feed in Tampa Bay. He's not going to have 78 yards and a touchdown in a lot of weeks.
True, but Raiders, Giants, Saints, Panthers, next 4.
I know, but
only the Saints scare you on any level.
Before yesterday, though, like other than the Bears, no one scared you, right?
No, it's true.
So
yeah, no, he's in that mix of like, if things break right, he could be good for you.
Hayden Hurst,
right?
Yeah, same sort of level of tight end.
Mike Gesicki.
He didn't play yesterday. He did. He just didn't have any.
Points. Are you sure he played yesterday?
I'm not positive.
I've heard rumors that he did, but I can find no evidence that Mike Gesicki played yesterday. He's no Adam Shaheen.
So he played for the Jets yesterday. Is what happened. Stephania, I don't know why I'm asking you about Matt Ryan because Matt Ryan's healthy. But Matthew, I'll ask you about Matt Ryan instead. 371 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. He had gone nearly 3 full games without a passing touchdown.
It's super weird. It's super, super weird. But turns out, I mean, who would have thought this? But turns out when you add Julio Jones to an offense, good things happen. It's super weird,
right?
A healthy Julio Jones apparently makes your quarterback better. Who knew? Who knew Field Yates? Here's the thing. Couple of things. Bad offense. Bad defense that he was playing. He was playing a bad defense, and they have a bad defense. So I don't, and plus got Julio Jones back healthy. And I know Calvin Ridley, left for a little bit, but felt like for the first time in a while, he had the full complement of guys. Russell Gage was out there as well. Hayden Hurst was out there as well. He had Ridley for much of the game. And again, the Vikings defense is, not so good. Their upcoming schedule, Field, the next 2 are home to Detroit and then at Carolina. Yeah. Carolina's played better defense, but I don't know that that's a defense that scares you. Then they're home to Denver. Then they've got a bye. Denver is playing better defense, obviously. But, I mean, he'll be in my top 10 ranks this week against the Lions.
Yeah, I say when we were going through those steps 1, 2, and 3, step 3 being like, he's back in my starting lineup, that will be Matt Ryan with a great matchup this week against Daniels Detroit Lions. That'll be a fun shootout right there. Part of the reason, as Matthew just explained, Stephania, why Matt Ryan was so great was because Julio Jones was so great as well. And on Sunday morning Fantasy Football Now, we talked about this extensively, and you kept warning us that like he's off the injury report, but being off the injury report does not mean a player is 100% healthy. He found a way to power through in a major way yesterday.
He really did. And power is actually the word that I would use. What we talked about was the fact he'd only had 1 limited practice session on Friday, and we didn't know much about it given all the changes in Atlanta, the fact they had the facility closed Thursday, and we hadn't seen Julio since he was injured in that game 2 weeks ago because he sat out week 5. So we didn't know what we were going to get, but we also said we know Julio is a guy who pushes through things, and sometimes he can go in and be injured, and all of a sudden he's putting up points. And I think after what happened the prior week, and Matt Ryan talked about struggling to find guys, everybody being covered, really the passing game was a disaster. Julio Jones showed me something on not the first touchdown play. It was really the second one, on the 4th and 3, where he ran 40 yards up the sideline because he had to push. It was power. And that is one thing that will really test your hamstrings. And the fact that he got through the game the way he did, produced the way he did, as long as we don't hear about a setback, because it's always a day or 2 later, that's when you hear about things. As long as we don't hear about any sort of setback, then I'd feel pretty good about Julio going forward.
And just to that point, just to wrap that real quickly, get this. Matt Ryan's had Julio Jones healthy for 3 weeks so far this year, right?
Yep.
Week 1, week 2, week 6.
Okay.
Those 3 weeks, he was a top 8 fantasy quarterback. In weeks 1 and 2, he was a top 8 fantasy quarterback, and it looks like he's trending that way for this week as well. Okay. In those 3 games, weeks 1, 2, and 6, 1,094 passing yards, 10 passing touchdowns, 84 fantasy points. That's on pace for over 5,800 yards, over 53 passing touchdowns, 448 fantasy points would be the best quarterback season of all time. Again, not saying that he's going to do any of all that, but just goes to show you what a huge difference having Julio Jones out there makes, especially when you consider how bad that defense is and how bad it's going to continue to be. They're going to be in shootouts all season long, and so you have a good quarterback in Matt Ryan with elite wide receivers in Julio and Ridley. And so as long as that defense is bad, and it will be, they're going to keep being in these shootouts. And I think as long as Julio Jones is healthy, he is a top 10 fantasy quarterback for me.
By the way, I think that Julio has heard enough of Daniel talking badly about him, and he's getting ready for that Lions matchup. So he was just showing you Daniel with 2 touchdowns.
Cool.
that he's about to.
Well,
Yeah.
he's
I
about to
literally
bring
haven't
your
said
team.
anything bad about Julio in like 18 months.
Oh, but it was all.
You've
It
always
was
been a never
very,
Julio
very
guy.
bad when
You've
you
always
did
been a
say
never
it.
Julio guy.
Have you watched
Julio
Calvin
doesn't
Ridley play
forget.
football?
Julio
I
doesn't
have.
forget.
I have, and Calvin Ridley can be good because of Julio.
You're not wrong about that. The same way that Julio was good because of Roddy White.
Very true. But you've always been a
Wow.
you've always been a Julio hater.
I have not been a Julio
Hater?
hater. I just don't think that he was a guy I was
think
interested in taking in the first round.
You guys
a
need to
Julio
talk
hater.
this through. We'll set up a meeting. We'll set up a meeting. of the
Julio is
minds.
an amazing all-star. I've always said that he is
I know. I'm
fantastic.
just- but
He's
we
just
can-
slightly more overrated for me than I would like. But
Wow.
that
There-
does not
now
mean
the
he's
truth
not
comes out.
amazing.
Okay.
Now
It's
the
like
truth
saying
comes out.
Shawshank Redemption is not like an
Yeah.
incredible film. Like it's
It is
great.
an
It's not the
incredible
best film of all
Wow.
time, but
It
it's
is
a
an
really
incredible
good film.
film.
We'll talk after week 7.
What's your favorite film of all time? What is your favorite film of all time?
Probably Crocodile Dundee
Dundee,
2.
LA? Yeah.
No, 2. LA just went off the rails.
true.
Totally jumped his shark. It was
I agree.
Yeah.
I was-
Two.
Yeah.
the 2 was
Two, not even the first one. It's like you have terrible taste, but not even terrible taste in the right direction.
in the right direction. 2 is the one that I think was the best.
Two is a good one, right?
Yeah.
Because there were so many unanswered questions from the first one.
Right, yes,
Right.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Two's the one with Colin Quinn in it. There you go.
Colin Quinn starts Carson Wentz on his fantasy team, in case you
bet he
didn't know
does.
that. Carson Wentz bounced back yesterday with 29.4 fantasy points, 2 passing touchdowns with 49 rushing yards and a touchdown. And we mentioned this at the top of the show, how banged up they are on offense. It's a miracle that Carson Wentz is producing the fantasy production that he has, the fantasy points that he has over the past 2 weeks. He also has 21 fantasy points in 3 of his past 4 games, Matthew. May not be pretty, but can you trust him as a starter?
Not only can I trust him as a starter, I think he's a buy low.
Okay.
In fact, and if he's been dropped in some leagues, because I don't think his rostership is 100%.
It's like 60-something.
Right, exactly. So he's out there in some leagues. Go get yourself some Carson Wentz. Look at this upcoming schedule, Field. They got the Giants. They get the Cowboys. There's a bye. They're at the Giants again. So 2 straight home games, Giants, Dallas, bye, at the New York Giants, at Cleveland. And by hook or by crook, he's done it. The rushing has come back, right? He's had a rushing touchdown in 4 of his past 5 games, so he's being more mobile. And while they are banged up, you mentioned Dallas Goedert will be back at some point. He's eligible to come back on Thursday. We don't expect him back, but he will be back sometime soon. Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson trending in the right direction. At some point soon, not some point soon, but at some point, he'll get Jalen Reagor back as well. Hopefully, Zach Ertz isn't as hurt. But by the way, if Miles Sanders, if this injury is serious, like it's going to be even more on Carson Wentz's shoulders. Like it is not pretty. But Carson Wentz has been fantastic fantasy-wise now for a few weeks. Like it was ugly against the Ravens. But you look up at the end of the day, and he's got almost 30 fantasy points. I mean, and
was
so
crazy.
You think about this schedule coming up: Giants, Dallas, bye, Giants again, Browns. Give me some Carson Wentz.
Okay, so I like the thought. I want to hold it a little bit until later because I think it reminds me of what we could discuss with Ryan Tannehill, if not today, at some point this season. By the way, Carson Wentz.
Ryan Tannehill's in a different category than Carson Wentz.
I'll explain it in a little bit later.
Fine.
51% rostership right now for Carson Wentz. So if you are looking for a Week 7 fill-in with 4 teams on a bye, Carson Wentz could be your answer.
You're welcome, America.
How do you banish high rates on car insurance? You switch to Geico during Geico-ween. October is Geico's favorite time of the year, and Geico has been working even harder to cast out high rates on car insurance and craft just the right coverage for you and your family. But here's the thing you may not know about Geico. They could also help you uncover more ways to save on the other things parked in your driveway, like your beloved motorcycle, boat, or even your home away from home, your RV. Geico could even help you save on homeowners and renters insurance. So visit geico.com today and you'll see firsthand that switching your insurance coverage doesn't have to be scary. The only thing that will haunt your nightmares is seeing just how much you could have saved if you had switched to Geico sooner. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Happy Geico-ween, everyone.
After a long summer, the wait is officially over and college football is back. And so is an all-new season of your favorite Dr. Pepper-obsessed college football town. That's right, we're talking about Fansville, everybody. So brace yourself for all the on-the-field football drama and off-the-field Dr. Pepper flavor your eyes and taste buds can handle. Because even though you can't be at the stadium, you can still dress, cheer, and drink Dr. Pepper like a true fan. Head to a store near you to treat your inner college football fan to an ice-cold 20-ounce Dr. Pepper today.
All right, Daniel. So we just did the Are You Back segment.
Yep.
Now we're doing the opposite. Like, not only are you not back, we're wondering whether we should just be dropping you. And I think there is a certain party line right now that you got to earn your way back into my lineup, and it pertains to several wide receivers. And we begin with Odell Beckham, who yesterday had 2 catches for 25 yards. He was started in 85% of leagues, and I don't know that you can say matchups matter with Odell, right? I mean, he had one great game in the best matchup he'd have all season against the Cowboys. But still, in games where you expect him to be at least reasonable, he gets you 2 catches for 25 yards. Matthew, I have to sort of reconfigure my scale here. How worried should you be? 1, not worried at all, have to keep grinding it out with him and starting him. 2, worried enough that I'm keeping him on my bench until he strings together at least 1 and more likely back-to-back consecutive great games. 3, I'm cutting him. He no longer carries value on my roster. You got those?
I think it's number 2.
Okay, so that's where Odell is for you.
Yeah.
Odell would be.
I'm like,
put him on the bench.
I'm putting him on the bench. Here's how I would rephrase it slightly, if I might.
Okay.
That Odell Beckham Jr. is no longer a must start. It's no longer like where I don't think about the matchup. I don't think about who else I have on my team. I just like, all right, that one's done, right? Because we all have players on our team like that. Like, you're not worried about who the matchup is when you start Patrick Mahomes. Like, if you have Mahomes on your team, you're just like, all right, you're starting, right? Beckham is no longer. He was at one point in that category for me, right? I mean, like, there are wide receivers. Like, you're not worried about who Kenny Golladay is facing, right? You're not worried about who A.J. Brown is facing. You're not worried about who DeAndre Hopkins is facing, right? Guys like that. Like, Beckham's not in that class anymore. Beckham is like, okay, is Baker healthy? Is Baker playing? Who are they playing? Let me think about this. Now, they play the Cincinnati Bengals next week. He's probably going to start for me against the Bengals next week, okay? Right? But, like, home to the Raiders. By the way, the Raiders have played better defense lately, Maybe, then he's got a bye. And then after that, he plays the Texans. He's probably going to see a lot of Bradley Roby. Maybe not. So for me, he has gone from a must-start, no-brainer to somebody on my bench, let me think about it. Let me see who else I have. Let me see what the matchup is. Let me consider it. And that's an amazing fall for somebody as talented as he is. But I think it speaks to not just him, but also what they want to do in Cleveland. They want to be a run-first offense. And they got dominated by Pittsburgh yesterday, and Baker wasn't 100%. So all those things contributed. But there's not a lot in what Odell Beckham's fantasy resume this year that gives you a ton of confidence. He's had one big game. He has had one big game. That's one more than T.Y. Hilton has had, who yesterday had 1 catch for 11 yards on 5 targets. He's still rostered in 81% of leagues. He was started in just 30% of leagues. Goodbye, T.Y. Hilton. He is in that category 3 where you can drop him. But you want to indulge me for a second? Go ahead. You want to hear about like this hilarious lineup that I was going to say one quick thing on T.Y. Hilton, and then we'll get back to your story. Yeah. The T.Y. stands for thank you. Great. Take my camera right here. Camera 1. Thank you, T.Y. Hilton, for years of great fantasy service. You were an amazing player for many, many years. Fantasy managers around the globe have enjoyed your services for many, many seasons. Incredibly talented. We wish you nothing but the best on waiver wires around the country. I mean, dude, nice, right? I don't think it's all your fault, by the way, T.Y. Hilton. I don't think Philip Rivers has done you any favors. No. But the fact of the matter is that you haven't had more than 5 targets in 4 of the last 5 games. You've been held to under 30 receiving yards in 3 different games. You have yet to score 13 fantasy points in a game this season. And listen, will you have a blip here or there? Sure. But I just want to say, all seriousness, genuine, you're a great player. You've had many, many great fantasy seasons. But for me, for this year, thank you. Next. Here's a lineup that I sported yesterday. Non-PPR scoring, 3 wide receivers, 6-point passing touchdown. So I have Russell Wilson. So my team, the strength of my team is I have Russell Wilson. I've heard of him. I have Zeke Elliott. Also heard of him. Dalvin Cook. This is a keeper auction league. Sure. Deep benches. So you don't have a ton of in-season flexibility. A lot of the stuff is done during the offseason. So on paper, coming into the year, you felt pretty good about this. Sure. What I would say. Of course,
Dalvin Cook sits out yesterday. Alexander Madison gets a total of 30 yards, so he gets you 3 points.
No, we can talk about that. Yeah.
Zeke has not played, but my wide receivers coming into the year, I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah, sure.
You know, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., T.Y. Hilton, Michael Gallup. Felt pretty good about those guys coming into the year, right?
I would have as well, sure.
Yeah, Evan Ingram and Zach Ertz on my roster at tight end. Yesterday, we put together and take away my quarterback because Brady was fine yesterday. Madison goes for 3. Jarvis Landry goes for 4. Odell goes for 2.5. Zach Ertz goes for 3.3. T.Y. Hilton goes for 1.1. Jake Elliott goes for 0. The Packers go for 0 as well.
Wow.
Those players.
You should post that. So, our mutual friend DJ Gallo, who he runs the Sports Pickle website, and so at Sports Pickle on Twitter, he used to. I don't know if he does it anymore, but he used to do it for many, many years, where he would basically once a week he would post what's the worst fantasy team in America, and people would send in their screenshots of legit fantasy teams where they were trying, but it's just one of those weeks and. You would have a strong case to be this week's
fewer than 14
worst
points.
fantasy team
Fewer than 14
in America.
Points. So I need,
in honor of DJ Gallo and Sports Pickle and your fantasy lineup, I would love to see it. Please send me your screenshots at Matthew Berry TMR. I will pick the worst one. Send it to us here, and tag at Fantasy Focus as well. But send us a screenshot of your legitimate. It was a brutal day where just a lot of stuff didn't go right.
Well,
and
I'm not
there were
counting on
buys.
it, by the way, but I actually have a chance to win tonight. I'm down by 33 with Zeke and Michael Gallup left. So
you legit
possible,
have a chance,
but
yeah.
Non-PPR, so you got to have a huge day from Zeke. Huge day.
But you could. But listen, all you need is one deep one from Michael Gallup, which easily could happen.
I love the way that you're speaking right now. I love that.
100%.
All right, let's move forward here. T.Y. Hilton, bye-bye. Marvin Jones, 2 catches, 8 yards yesterday. Again, you're dropping him. You put him on the bench. Bye-bye. I'm with you there. Drop Marvin Jones if you need to. I'm not saying you just have to go out of your way and do it. T.Y. Hilton, you can just go ahead and do it, right?
What the frustrating thing is they play Atlanta next week.
Yeah, so he'll probably be in the top 30 for wide receivers. I'm saying if you needed the spot.
Hasn't had more than 55 receiving yards in 9 straight games, yet to catch more than 4 passes in a game this season. Consecutive games, Field. Back-to-back games with under 3 fantasy points.
Wow, that's not good.
That is hashtag not good. And then, but the problem is that the schedule, by the way, at Atlanta, home to Indy. Yeah. Okay, not great. But then at Minnesota, home to Washington. 3 of the next 4 are great, which, by the way, just, if you could somehow get Matthew Stafford or Kenny Golladay, even Hawkinson, who's out there in some leagues. We'll talk about DeAndre Swift in a minute here, who's not 100% rostered. It's a nice schedule.
All right, let's keep it moving here. But I think probably with Marvin Jones, the idea is that if you absolutely needed the roster spot, you could. I think I'd probably hold him just based off of that schedule. I'm not starting him, just hold there.
Boy, but this is the crazy part, though, Field. I mean, with schedule, right? So it's at Atlanta next week, and then it's Indy, and we think the Colts are a pretty good defense despite yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? And they'll be coming off their bye. So my point is if you're not starting them against Atlanta, if you're like, it's a great schedule coming up, but if you're not going to start them against Atlanta, you're basically saying you're going to hold Marvin Jones for 3 weeks because you're probably not starting him against the Colts. Right? So, if you're not going to – the only way I'm holding on to Marvin Jones is if you would start him against Atlanta. That's the question you need to ask yourself, because if you're not starting him against Atlanta and you're likely not starting him against the Colts, even if he has a big game against Atlanta, under 3 yards, a big game against the Falcons, now he plays the Colts. You still starting him? I mean, you know what I mean? Right? So then you're right, then you start getting into okay. So Anyway, I understand it. For me, he's welcome to Dumpsville.
Our friend Adam Levitan, who established the run, has what he sort of jokingly refers to as the age model, right? When you get old, generally speaking, you start to fade. And we've seen it with a lot of guys. Including,
yes. I love Levitan. Levitan would have been done with me about 15 years ago.
True. Good point. Julian Edelman is one of the players that makes his age model, as he, at the age of 34, had just 2 catches and 8 yards yesterday. I know Stephania wants to get on this one because perhaps the knee is what is holding him down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he's hurt, but we've never seen it really impact him the way it did yesterday or what we've seen of late. I mean, Julian Edelman is a fixture on the Patriots injury report the way Tom Brady used to be back in the day. And yet we have just counted on him, number one, for volume, because we know that he's a frequent target and he's been an outlet for Brady for years and appeared to be for Cam when they had that huge game earlier this year. But he definitely is struggling. And whether it's hard to encapsulate this game because the Patriots had such an altered schedule going into this week and a lot of uncertainty. I mean, other teams did too and still managed to perform better. But Edelman, like you said, it was 2 of 6 for 8 yards. I mean, he had better stats throwing the ball than catching it.
He did.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that with Edelman, I'm not saying the knee is not part of it, but like they're just right now not a good passing
Right.
offense.
No,
that
they
to me
aren't.
feels
Cam
like the
has
more
not looked
concerning
good.
part.
Cam hasn't looked good passing the ball for much of this year. In fairness, like
I think yesterday was a bad passing day. Other
Yes.
days they just ran the football so well, and he did
Correct.
have. I just think yesterday was. I mean, talk about out of rhythm. Yeesh.
here's what I will say. That right, and in fairness to Cam, right? I mean, like Edelman's his best guy. I mean, like Demir Bird and N'Keal Harry and Ryan Izzo. Like, I mean, there's not a lot of excitement out there in terms of other pass catchers. And so for me, that's why I would put Julian Edelman in the I'm keeping him on bench. I'm definitely not getting rid of him. Stephania, you mentioned the targets. Like, he's still gotten 6 or more targets in every game this season. He threw the 2 passes yesterday, so they're trying to get a little bit creative with him as well. I have to believe that Cam Newton and Josh McDaniels will get this offense better. I don't know if they'll get it a lot better, but I have to believe it will get at least a little bit better. And regardless, whatever it is, this offense is like Julian Edelman is still the best player on this offense. He's still getting the majority of looks on this offense. And so a number 1 wide receiver on a functional offense, which is what we think the Patriots are. They're a functional offense. Like, I'm not ready to get rid of Julian Edelman just yet. I may not, he's no longer an automatic start for me, similar to, some of the other guys we talked about here, but I'm not getting rid of Julian Edelman just yet.
The last one might be the trickiest. It's Juju Smith-Schuster, who yesterday had 2 catches for 6 yards. He's rostered in 99% of leagues. He was started in 77% of leagues. However, here is his receiving yardage by week this season: 69, 48, 43, 28, 6. That's in succession. So he has declined literally every week so far this season. Over the past 2 games, he has 3 catches, Matthew.
What did we talk about on Friday? Like, they have turned him into Danny Amendola. Last year, his average depth of target was over 9 yards. This year, coming into Sunday, and I assume it hasn't changed, coming into Sunday was under 5. Like, it's all line of scrimmage stuff. It's dink and dunk. It's just very short passes. They're not taking deep shots to him. And by the way, there's an argument to be made just based on what we've seen in the production so far. And I don't know how much of it's his fault versus the quarterback versus the offense, whatever. But there is a legit argument to be made that Juju Smith-Schuster is the 3rd worst wide receiver on his team.
3rd best.
Or best. Either or, but third best. I mean, third, yeah, you're right. He's the 3rd best. Thank you. That he's the 3rd best wide receiver on his team behind Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. And by the way, James Washington was better than him yesterday as well. Like, he might be 4th.
Yeah, he's 3rd.
I mean, it's here's what I would say. Juju Smith-Schuster is definitely no longer a must-start. He is a bench guy, and if you wanted to get rid of him, I wouldn't look at you weird.
Yeah, I think he feels the same way to me as Edelman does. Because he's like he's 22, 23 years old, right? Like he was one of the youngest players when he came into the league as a rookie. He's only in his 4th season, so I'm holding, but I'm certainly very pessimistic about the outlook going forward.
But I mean, here's the thing. Here's his touch count. I mean, here's the upcoming schedule too, right? At Tennessee, at Baltimore, at Dallas. You like that? Home to Cincinnati. But the other thing is here's the other thing, Field. There may not have been a better matchup for Juju Smith-Schuster than the Cleveland Browns yesterday. Like they
put
they're
too much
brutal
weight into
against. Fine, we don't.
So what I'm saying is
but,
that like it's not about who he's playing or who he's not playing. It's about my fundamental belief that Juju is a much better player than he's shown so far this season, and a belief that if there is a chance of somebody resurrecting their season, regardless of who they are playing, I'm more likely to bet on Juju turning things around than a T.Y. Hilton, for example, turning around, or maybe even A.J. Green keeping it going at this age going forward.
That is a completely fair argument. The concern here, Field, is when. We're in week 7.
I get it.
We're
dude.
in week 7.
Right? No, I feel
like
you.
we're halfway through the regular season of fantasy.
All I'm saying is it's less about the schedule that I'm concerned about. It's more just like if I'm going to believe in him, it's just because I believe not in who he's playing, but who he is as a player. All right.
Which is completely fair. I will just say that this year especially, if your league has not added bench spots or IR spots, and we're starting to get into the meat of the buys, and you may not have the luxury to carry somebody like Juju that you just like. Play this out for a second. I'm just. I don't mean to belabor this, but I know. Okay, I'll make this last point. Again, I just sort of think it like, are you starting him next week against Tennessee?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so now he plays Baltimore the week after
if he
that.
has a great game, I'll start him
Against Baltimore, no matter what. He's 1 for 7.
If he has a 7 for 100 game next week, we're all going to be starting Juju.
All right.
It's Juju. He's 20. Again, this is a belief in a 23-year-old or 24-year-old.
I know.
We got to roll. Stephania, what do you want to add on these Steelers wide receivers before we get into another one of them who's actually doing good things in fantasy?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting to see. I've heard a lot of conversation about Juju maybe just not being comfortable as the number one, and obviously he's been playing through a knee issue the last couple of weeks as well. And so, is the decline really in these last 2 weeks partly because he's not practicing as much and his knee's not feeling well? Hasn't had Deontay Johnson consistently. Does that change the dynamic on the field? I would think Deontay Johnson will be back this week. We were surprised that he didn't play this past weekend. So it'd be interesting to see if Juju gets healthier, Deontay Johnson's back, and they have all the receivers in the mix.
All right, that's fair. I just
It was a weird game. They had the pick 6 as well. They scored 38 points, and Ben Roethlisberger has 1 touchdown pass. I mean, it was a weird game offensively for them. So, but anyway. But Chase Claypool, I'll just say this. Dude, Chase Claypool is legit. He's all sorts of legit.
Yeah, he looked great again yesterday at 18.1 fantasy points with 4 catches on 4 targets for 74 yards and a rushing touchdown on a play. I feel like he actually almost had a second touchdown. He was called down at basically the 18-inch line. So the big plays are going to happen for Chase Claypool. Don't have a perfect parallel that we've seen, but kind of reminds me of Darius Slayton with more volume last year, right? Yeah. Even if you can't count on touchdowns every single game, he might score in 8 separate games this year or 9 separate games this year and break some of the efficiency models.
Yeah, I mean, might be a good example is Deebo Samuel over the second half of last year, too. I mean, over the second half of last year, Deebo Samuel was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. So, yeah, I mean, to me, Chase Claypool is now, to me, you're starting him until further notice.
Agree on that. I feel the same way. Maybe getting close there with T. Higgins. As you do, we talked about A.J. Green earlier, and maybe he bounced back a little bit, but it did not come at the cost of T. Higgins, who had 6 catches for 125 yards yesterday, good for nearly 19 fantasy points. He had a season high in both catches and yards. Certainly looks the part. 3rd straight game with a 25-plus yard reception. He is a guy who has all sorts of big play propensity, does T. Higgins, and we don't have to worry about the matchups because they're going to have to throw it a lot, and teams are going to give him some junk yardage time. I mean, that was a good matchup yesterday. I mean, a bad matchup yesterday, and he shredded that Colts defense throughout the game. Joe Burrow's volume is just out of control. T. Higgins needs to be added in all leagues this week. We talked about this last week.
I feel like we've been talking about him for quite some while. A lot of it came on one big play, but whatever. That's part of his game. I love T. Higgins. Love him this season. Love him in Dynasty and Keeper leagues. I'm in a long-time keeper league with a bunch of buddies that I went to college with. So this league's been going on for 25 years. And this weekend, I have insane depth at tight end. I have Hunter Henry, Darren Waller, George Kittle, Travis Kelce in this league.
Wow.
And I can and it's not tight end. It's just, I don't know, again, because you keep players. It's a dynasty league, so you keep so many players over the years. Anyway, the point is I've had bad wide receivers. So I talked to a guy in my league, my buddy Gary, and I said, hey, you've got a good wide receivers. You need a tight end. So I offered him Hunter Henry for T. Higgins. He said no. I offered him Darren Waller. He said no. I want to keep T. Higgins. I ended up trading Darren Waller for Kenny Golladay. He was willing to trade, which I think is a fair trade. Waller for Golladay, in a keeper league, about the same age, and so we ended up doing that deal. But he was just like, oh no. I want to hang on to T. Higgins. It was just I'm just saying, again, I'm not, and I don't want to throw my buddy on the bus because he's not he's a very good fantasy manager. He's basically saying that he was okay. He just long-term thinking, for the life of players, he just did not want to give up T. Higgins. The point of that story wasn't about that, that he values Higgins more than Golladay, but merely that he just did not want to trade the guy.
Well, if it was Justin Jefferson that was in the mix, I might not have made that trade either, as Justin Jefferson continues to pile up the catches and fantasy points, 9 catches for 166 yards and 2 gritty touchdown celebrations for nearly 40 fantasy points yesterday. Before the show, Fantasy Football Now yesterday, Matthew was debating between Justin Jefferson and Julio Jones in a spot for a league.
Yeah,
I ended up going with Julio. Guessed wrong.
I did guess wrong. I went with Julio. I mean, I have a very good team in that league.
I've been telling you not to trust that guy for years.
Yeah.
Barry.
We're just having fun. Obviously, Justin Jefferson has been a star. This is what we talked about coming into the preseason when we posited he was in the best spot of all rookie wide receivers to make good as a fantasy asset right away. He has been the best fantasy wide receiver amongst rookies this season. He is going to be a player that you should get accustomed to having in your lineup, setting it, and forgetting it. We'll be back with a couple more.
I want to ask you a real quick question. Are either of you ready to say that from this point of the season forward that Justin Jefferson is going to score more fantasy points than Adam Thielen?
I mean, it's possible, but Adam Thielen's like the third best wide receiver in fantasy
That's
this
what I'm
year.
saying from this point forward.
Right, I hear you. But here's, to me, the point is not whether it's Thielen or Jefferson. The point is it's a conversation.
Yeah.
The fact that it's a conversation and the fact that if it turns out that it's Jefferson from here on out, that no one's going to be like, that came out of nowhere.
Right.
But because Adam Thielen was drafted as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, Justin Jefferson wasn't drafted at all. So the fact that that's a conversation to me is the big win for anyone that managed to pick up Justin Jefferson. And I don't think he's available in any leagues. I can't imagine that he is, but he
Not
shouldn't
many
be.
leagues.
Not many, but just in terms of if you want to value Justin Jefferson, like again, same that we talk about with Julio, right? And Matt Ryan, like it's a bad defense that's going to be in shootouts all the time.
Yeah.
And just watching the film, the kid can play. Like the kid can absolutely play. So.
He's still available in 19% of leagues. He was only started in 40% of leagues yesterday. A little bit
How do you not start him against Atlanta?
A little bit of backfield talk on the back end of this. But first, Shell knows that between every tee up, layup, and batter up, that you can't wait to catch up with your favorite podcast. So come to Shell and get 3 things done at once. First, fill up with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus to help keep your engine running like new. Then save up with the Fuel Rewards program and never pay full price for gas again. And finally, snack up with in-store rewards to save even more at the pump. Oh, time to wrap it up. Make the most of the stop you need to make with Shell. In engines that continuously use Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. See full terms and conditions at fuelrewards.com.
If you're missing the fun of the ballpark right now, you're not alone. But just because you can't be in the stadium doesn't mean you can't bring that classic ballpark feeling home with you. And the best way to do that is with Ballpark Buns and Rolls. Ballpark and the ballpark go together like baseball and summer. All right, they're an American pastime and America's favorite buns and rolls. They're an essential part of celebrations, both big and small. There's nothing worse than your bun breaking under that pressure. And guess what? Ballpark buns and rolls never fall apart. They're always freshly baked, always soft, and always delicious. Ballpark buns and rolls are a great way to get a carefree taste of summer any time of year, whether shared at a backyard barbecue, a fall tailgate, or any manner of celebration all year round. You can't help but enjoy yourself when enjoying a ballpark bun creation. So next time you're picking up essentials for grilling, tailgating, a little slow cooker action, or a nostalgic night in with Crocodile Dundee 2, make sure you grab Ballpark Buns and Rolls. Find them wherever you shop for groceries.
Well done by you, Daniel. Let's get to just a couple.
You know what? I want you to give me a book report on Crocodile Dundee 2.
No!
Because you know what? If it's your favorite movie of all time, Crocodile Dundee 2, I want you should be able to do it right now. We're running short on time.
Sure.
But tomorrow I'd like to hear you to give a quick synopsis.
Tomorrow, I got 2 Monday Night Football games to watch.
It's your favorite movie of all time. You said my favorite movie of all time I could recite right now.
My favorite movie, fine.
So you should be able to, you should know it.
Yeah,
you should know it like the back of your hand.
I do. I just don't want to. I feel bad talking about it because I know you
don't want to
wrote Crocodile
spoil
Dundee
it for
3.
those that haven't
Exactly,
seen it yet.
that's what it
Everybody
is.
knows
Well,
that.
we'll do a spoiler alert, so anyone that hasn't seen it yet,
That's
a
fair.
movie
We got to
that's
move.
23
We have
years
fantasy
old.
football
Yeah,
talk
go
to get to. Let's just to get to a couple of backfields based off what we saw yesterday. So DeAndre Swift had a breakout game of sorts yesterday for Daniel's Lions in a victory. 14 rushes for 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus 3 catches. Good for 27.3 fantasy points. He had a long run early in the game. He looked very much like the player we saw during his time at Georgia. And I am really, really hopeful that the self-scouting, we talked about this last week, that the Lions did during the bye week, led them to believe that DeAndre Swift needs to be playing more. However, I'm concerned this is going to be a flash-in-the-pan moment. Here's the reason why. Adrian Peterson had 15 rushing attempts still yesterday. So, despite the fact that DeAndre Swift is clearly the most explosive and best pure talent in the Lions' backfield, he still played fewer snaps than Adrian Peterson yesterday, and Kerryon Johnson still got 6 total opportunities, 4 catches 4 rushes, plus 2 targets. So I want this to be a breaking point that DeAndre Swift becomes the guy in the backfield going forward, but I would sort of urge people to maybe just like tap the brakes a little bit here.
Yeah, but I will say that, again, as we talked about earlier, the schedule is ridiculous, right? Falcons, home to the Colts, at Minnesota, home to Washington. So it's a pretty good schedule in 3 of the next 4 weeks. And so all those, I think, are games that they'll be competitive in. And so I think Swift earned more time. Obviously, if you've been holding on to Kerryon Johnson, you can now, this should, if you haven't gotten rid of him already, you can certainly waive him now. I think your point is well taken. Like, we're going to see the numbers from Swift and be like, oh, no. Peterson's still going to be a thing, but I think it's now more of a 2-man committee than it is a 3-man. Yes, Kerryon will mix in a little bit, but I think Swift earned more time. Certainly needs to obviously be 100% rostered.
The Bucs were without Leonard Fournette yesterday after he was active but played just 1 snap the previous Thursday night. It was a end of the half snap, so he just basically all he had to do was stand there. Ronald Jones had his 3rd straight game with over 105 rushing yards. He had 23 rushes for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. So here's what I'm going to say. And Bruce Arians, if you're listening, this is just a little piece of advice. Not that you need it from a guy like me, but it's more of like an ask. When Leonard Fournette comes back, keep running Ronald Jones as your go-to back. We always talk about how fickle the nature of Bruce Arians has been with his backs, and he's had a lot of success coaching offense. So I'm not trying to decry the merits of his approach. I'm just saying it feels like Ronald Jones is that dude in your backfield right now. Let's keep things rolling here. He had a 36-18 snap edge over LaShawn McCoy, but you were just saying DeAndre Swift has earned more time. I think Ronald Jones has earned that Bucs bell cow job. We just hope it doesn't turn around when Fournette returns healthier next week.
Multiple catches in 6 games this season, in all 6 games this season, which I think is important, again, just in terms of Brady. And Brady's been kept, relatively upright as well. And so, you mentioned the 3 straight games where he's had over 100 yards. The Buccaneers are winning, too. I mean, that's the thing. So I'm with you. Bruce Arians, yes, he's a little bit fickle with his backfield, but he's also a guy that's a player's coach. And players in the locker room know, like, hey, when somebody's balling out, they should not be coming off the field. And so I think Ronald Jones, top 20-ish running back until further notice.
I sure hope so. Stefan, you wanted to add something on Leonard Fournette here.
Yeah, I think that after we thought he was going to be active yesterday but limited, and then they ended up holding him out, obviously it looks like his next chance next week, he's likely to be able to play. But I agree with you guys. I don't think they're going to feel compelled to put him in a lot, nor are they going to want to coming off this ankle injury.
All right, so last one here, and we'll continue to monitor Fournette's status as they get into their practice week in advance of the Raiders game, Sunday Night Football. Last one here, I'm talking about the Rams just for a second here, all right, because
sure.
Here's what we're going to do again this week. We're going to try to sort through the Rams' backfield, 7th week of doing this.
Yep.
That's the point, right, is that Malcolm Brown's not going to fade. He had 25 snaps yesterday, 5 behind Darrell Henderson. Cam Akers had 1. Here's what we know for sure. In terms of when they had the football in their hands, the best player of the 3 right now is Darrell Henderson. And I say
not particularly close.
I say right now only because Cam Akers could get there, but he's better than Malcolm Brown. But I mentioned this before the podcast to Kyle, Matt, and Daniel, is that think about what happened yesterday in that Bucs-Packers game. Part of the reason why the Bucs got throttled was they couldn't protect Aaron Rodgers. He had multiple bad picks. And it seemed like pass protection amongst running backs was not a strength yesterday for them. Was not a strength. It seems like Malcolm Brown does some of the things that Sean McVay and the coaching staff prefer that don't make the stat sheet, which is why I don't think he's going to go away. If I had to choose one to roster, of course it's Darrell Henderson. But I'm going to have a hard time ever feeling like one Rams running back is consistently a top 25 play.
But listen, 14 for 88. He had explosive plays. He actually touched the ball a lot more than Malcolm Brown. I understand when you're talking about in terms of snaps, but in terms of actually touching the ball or fantasy opportunities, Darrell Henderson dominated Malcolm Brown. And, oh, by the way, got into the end zone. It was a ticky-tack holding call that they called back, and then Robert Woods catches a touchdown pass and then down. He gets down to the 1, and he almost got to the corner. Actually, it was a bad block by Gerald Everett, and he should have gotten into the end zone there. If Gerald Everett does his job, he gets on that end around, and then something happened with his foot, and he had to come out of the game. But the fact is that I think Darrell Henderson separated himself from the pack a little bit last night.
That's
an offense that needs players.
I sure hope so.
Needs playmakers.
Hey, coming up tomorrow on the podcast, we're going to address what I mentioned: Ryan Tannehill, Carson Wentz, and the dilemma in finding room for them in your lineups. Maybe there shouldn't be one, but is there? That plus Monday Night Football recaps, waiver wire columns, and all the latest news. For Stephania, Daniel, Kyle, Matthew, Matt, Keith, everybody behind the scenes, I'm Field. Talk to you guys on Tuesday.
Peace.